management. We were also successful in implementing many guidelines for the management of the coastal areas and marine spatial planning. Marine spatial planning is one step beyond the integrated coastal area management, and it got a lot of success. It's, many different countries are using now this guideline, a step-by-step approach to marine spatial planning. And it has been translated to Russian, to Chinese, and to Vietnamese. And we are doing the translation to Spanish just now. Okay, let's go now to see how the United Nations works in this international domain, why we need this multilateral approach to the different problems that we have in the ocean. Well, we need this multilateral approach because we have serious problems. We have a lot of key issues that need of this cooperation of all the different nations. We have to protect territories, and we have to clarify how those territories are going to be used in the benefit of the entire humanity, not only in the benefit of a few countries. So the Arctic issue is one of the hot issues that we have now in the United Nations, because the resources that apparently are in the Arctic, because of the new ship routes that can be open in the Arctic very soon. I'm not talking about science fiction, I'm talking about this summer. And we have to manage the global commons that we have in the humanity. We have natural resources, fisheries in the oceanic waters that belongs to the humanity, not only for one country. We have to implement policies for sustainability. For example, the ballast water and the invasive species. This is a key issue as well. And this is something that has to be done in terms of a multilateral approach. We have to coordinate observation of scientific programs in terms of obtaining the synergies, to arise the synergies to obtain the maximum benefit with the less cost and efforts. And of course, we have to coordinate assessments for policymakers like the IPCC or IPBES or others. So that's only a few examples. And I have taken in here a verbatim paragraph of DOALOS, the United Nations Group for the Law of the Sea, just remarking in there that the Arctic will be an issue. The Arctic is opening new ship routes, but not only ship routes, and we have to be very cautious on the way we are managing and in the way we are considering the Arctic. If the Arctic is a property of just 5 countries, or if the Arctic is a global common for all of us. We have another issue with the new the change of the national waters, or the use of the seafloor resources in national waters. Actually, most of the countries in the world are enlarging the space that they are using in the ocean, and that will create a lot of tensions. Just to give you an idea, Europe, once that Europe is extending the area of competence, of the area of domain in the oceans, the territory, the underwater territory of Europe will be higher than the territory in land. So this is a huge amount of territory, and the ambitions of the countries are behind. So this is a tricky issue, and it has to be done in connection with the United Nations. In concrete, that will be the International Seabed Authority, the one who is controlling this issue. Well, we have a big issue, that is the waters beyond national jurisdiction. In this slide, you can see in white the extension of the continental shelf, not only continental shelf, the new areas that the countries are demanding now, but all the area in pale blue is the area that is beyond national jurisdiction. So that represents more than, or around 60%, 65% of the Earth's surface. So this is a huge territory, and all of this is our global common. And all of this has to be negotiated, has to be used and regulated using multilateral approaches. So in here is how we work. We work in terms of integration, and in this slide you have the blue at your left, and this is the United Nations architecture. We have the United Nations system based in New York. And in there we have DOA laws. This is the law of the sea. And the United Nations has developed in different agencies like FAO, like IMO, the International Maritime Organization in London, FAO in Rome, UNEP is a program, it's not an agency, but the United Nations has developed agencies and programs. And in programs we have UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, and UNDP, the United Nations Development Program. So those are the bank. This is the guys who provide money for us. And United Nations has also some organizations, like the one that I already have mentioned, the International Seabed Authority. Well, this is the vertical structure in the United Nations, and all of them work together to produce the conventions. And I have some conventions in there, the United Nations Framework Conventions for Climate Change, the Convention of the Law of the Sea, the CBD, the Convention for Biodiversity, the London Convention on Marine Pollution, the Ballast Water Convention, the CITES Convention. Well, there are many, many different conventions. And we also fund and we create and support the research programs like the IOCCP, the International Ocean Carbon Program, the GOOS, GCOS, GeoGeos, IGBP, WCRP, and others. And both the conventions and the projects are linked by the assessment processes. So all these programs that we are funding, one of the missions of those programs are provide good science to assess the policymakers for the conventions. So that's the way that everything is linked in the scientific arena and in the governance. So this is the same example that I showed you before, and it reproduces exactly the other slide. The United Nations agencies, in this case together with ICSU, have funded the WCR program, which is linked with the IPCC, and all of them provide data for the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. Some other examples is GeoGeos, which is an alliance of different observation systems, including the Global Ocean Observation System that IOC is supporting, but also other observation systems for the atmosphere, for terrestrial ecology, and others that are provided by other organizations like WMO in Geneva, like UNEP in Nairobi, or FAO. And this is a third example of how the governance are integrated with the national and with the regional norms, directives in the terms of the European Commission. And in here we see that the European Commission has signed many different conventions in terms of marine pollution. The European Union is a party of the regional sea conventions like HELCOM in the Baltic Sea. This is the HELCOM Copenhagen, the Helsinki Copenhagen HELCOM, OSPAR, Oslo Paris for the North Atlantic, the Barcelona Convention for the Mediterranean, the Black Sea in the east of Europe, and so on. But all of them has to be contained within the London Convention. When Europe is creating rules, they have to be more strict than the rules that we have for the United Nations. So at least they have to accomplish with the United Nations conventions. And well, one thing that we have realized, and probably you have realized, is that all of this is quite complicated. There are many different United Nations agencies that have competence in the sea, not only IOC. We have FAO that are working in fisheries. We have the International Maritime Organization, IMO. We have the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. Many different organizations are working in the sea. And all of them are coordinated in one single body that the name is UN Oceans. You have in there 13, I think, different organizations, but some of them are just funding organizations, like the World Bank, like UNDP. Others are users, like the World Tourist Organization from the United Nations. Others are just working in industry, like UNIDO. But most of them are really having competence in the sea. And all of them met once a year to discuss how we are working with the oceans, the new things that are appearing, the emerging issues that we have to address all together to do a better use of our resources and to work in coordination, in aligned. But the UN Oceans per se does not have or develop their own programs. So UN Oceans is a forum to discuss the things and to coordinate, but UN Oceans does not implement any research program. And to complete the United Nations family, we have the United Nations Oceans in the upper part of the slide, and we have different tools to divulgate and to do outreach on the oceans. One is the United Nations Atlas of the Ocean, that is hosted by FAO in Rome, and the members of the Atlas are some others, in addition to the UN Ocean, some private organizations like National Geographic, for example. And we also have GESAMP. GESAMP is the group of experts on scientific aspects of marine environmental protection. And GESAMP is an operational branch, let's say, of UN Oceans. GESAMP has their own research programs, something that UN Oceans doesn't have. So finally, we are entering now in science for global sustainability, what is happening now in the scientific arena. And we will realize that now we are facing a new stage in the organization of research, and that will create some opportunities and challenges in ocean science and governance. And well, we have again this slide in here, but now we are interested only in the part that is in color. This is the blue part. This is the United Nations agencies and programs that are creating the research programs together with ICSU, SCORE, and other bodies like the Global Forum for Oceans, Coasts, and Islands. And we all together are funding, are adopting the best ideas that comes to us to create international or global research programs. Those are the 5 basic programs in terms of global change. And you have in here IGBP. I think that all of you have heard about IGBP. We have WCRP, the World Climate Research Program. I have mentioned it many times today. We have Diversitas, that is mostly related with biodiversity. And we have IHDP. This is the human dimension of climate change. And we have a partnership of the Earth System Science for Protection of the Earth, that is ASCCP. So this is the basic 5. And I am almost 100% sure that the things that you are doing in your laboratories are linked with one of these programs in here, or at least in one of the big 33. So each of these programs, like IGBP, for example, has developed different research programs like GLOBEC, like LOIC, like others, and any people starting to work in oceanography now have to look to this slide and to recognize where he is working in terms of using the science that he is doing to have more visibility in the international arena. We have to realize that science is not something that we do only for our governments. We have to do our science to create a pool of knowledge in the international arena. And this is the way to channel our science in the international arena. Just to identify where you are and say, okay, my data are going to be delivered to IGBP or are going to be delivered to WCRP or to any other of these big 33 programs. But what is happening? Well, it's the sunset of most of these programs will happen in 2013, so only 1 year from now. When I started to work in IOC, I was hoping to have the opportunity to start new global programs in the world. The reality was that I have to close most of these programs in here. And close a program is really a tricky issue. And most of them will have the sunset in 2013, so they are just now in the synthesis phase. They are producing the last reports. And this sunset is happening very close to the conference Rio +20, the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Rio +20. So both things, Rio +20 and the sunset of the projects, are pushing us to prepare a new framework for new research programs in the future. So ICSU, the International Council of Scientific Unions, have started this visioning process 3 years ago. It was organized in 3 different steps, and the 3 has already been done. And ICSU have identified these 5 pieces as the key things that we have to address in the future global research programs. The first challenge that we have to realize is that the programs has to include forecasting as part of their main topics. The second one is that we have to improve our observations. We have to develop the observation system that is needed to manage the global and regional environmental change, because actually the things that we have are still imperfect, so we have to work much more in terms of observations. We have to identify thresholds. There has been a few very nice papers published in 2009 and 2010 in terms of threshold, red lines that we have already trespassed in terms of the sustainability of the planet, and we have to work much more in this threshold. We have to determine and anticipate and recognize and to avoid to go beyond these red lines in the planet. So this is really a tricky issue, and a lot of research has to be done in that way. We have to include responses in terms of institutional, economic, and behavioral changes. So what that means? That means that science has to be, natural science has to work much closely with social science. So this is something that was very clear in all the discussion, that we have to put together the oceanography with the social science in this case. We are just talking here about the oceans. And finally, we have to include innovation. We have to encourage innovation. And also, we have to transfer innovation to developing countries. So that's capacity building. That's the way we have to manage the science if we want to work in global sustainability. But not only ICSU, IOC has also worked in terms of trying to identify where we have to go in terms of science for the future. We have published in last year this one paper that the title was Looking into the Future of Ocean Science, an IOC Perspective, and this diagram summarizes the way that we are looking to this future. We think that we have to work in 3 big areas. We have to work with the scientific drivers, that means mainly climate change and ecosystem functioning. We have to work in technological development, and in the first talk this morning, we have seen many new advances, and as the speaker has mentioned, we have now a view of the ocean as we never have had before. And we have to work in terms of creating new frameworks of cooperation, just to have in mind that we have one planet and one ocean. I have in the gray part of the slide different things that we have to use in terms of develop these 3 big areas. And one of them is technology. Technology is evolving very, very fast. Here we have technology that can be used in terms of local sampling or global sampling, that things that are developing, still developing, and tools that are already mature enough to be implemented. So this is a diagram that gives you an idea on where we are working. Of course, there are new things that are being developed and that can be plotted or figured here in the diagram, but they are not there. But you have an idea on the way that we are approaching to this. Finally, we have to work with new frameworks of cooperation. We need to go beyond our boundaries, to go beyond our own countries, and to work in terms of big alliances. And I am just mentioning here 3 big ideas. 2 of them are already implemented. One is POGO, the Partnership for the Observation of Global Oceans, that is some kind of club of rich countries. It's like the OECD, but in terms of the ocean. It's the biggest laboratories. They made the club of POGO, but they are doing a very good job. They are funding grants, they are finding training courses, they are deploying buoys, they are working very hard. We have ocean sites. That's a very nice network for the observation of the ocean, for the deep ocean mostly. And we have a new idea that is WAMS, the World Association of Marine Stations, that was created last year, and I think that it will be discussed in the next assembly of IOC in 15 days from now. And if it is adopted by IOC, I think that that will be a very good framework of cooperation for the future, and mostly to transfer capacity building to developing countries. So I have summarized in here the criteria, the general principles that we take into consideration when someone is asking us to fund a new global program. And not all the ideas that come to us accomplish with these 5 principles. So if you want to send to me or to IOC or to FAO or IMO or other body or other United Nations body one idea, in order to explore if the idea has success or has potential or not, we are going to look to all these 5 criteria in here. We will look to the scientific relevance for understanding the ecology of the planet and the future evolution of oceans and climate. That's very important. The things that you are approaching has to be new, has to be things that are not being addressed by other international research programs at present. The implementation requiring multidisciplinary approaches, so things has to be always considered from this point of view. The things that are very local or that only are needed from one discipline are things that we don't take into consideration. It has to be very clear in terms of transparency in governance and in the financial structure. And of course, the objectives has to be achievable. They have to have a good communication policy. Results has to be properly published, etc. And I'm going to conclude with the same slide that I put at the beginning. At the beginning, I mentioned you that we were trying to close the link or to create the bridge between science and governance, just involving in this equation also the economy and the society. And this is being a reality now. We are trying to create new research program where the oceanography, the hydrography, the engineering works together with the social science. That will be the best way to convince the policymakers that we are creating proven, solid science to assess the governments and to implement the different solutions or the few, let's say, solutions or options that we have to manage or to address climate change in the future. So I have a few conclusions as part of this talk. Well, first one is obvious. Ocean governance is imperfect, and to avoid the discrepancies and the fragmentation of ocean governance, the United Nations is creating some interface for cooperation. That is UN Oceans, that is GESAMP and others. The second one is also obvious. Ocean issues are global and affect all nations. So we have to address these problems altogether. This has to be something that has to be always addressed in terms of multilaterality, not in terms of one, two, or a few countries. In the future, the oceans will be subject to a lot of different anthropogenic pressures. So the main problems that we have, we are not going to be solved in the next 15, 25 years. So we have to persevere, we have to continue in that way because they are not going to disappear, and we are probably to create new problems. So the demand for information from the United Nations regular process for IPBES will be higher. So the laboratories, the member states, have to be prepared to that. It cannot happen that, as it is happening now with the marine strategy of the European Union, that we are not working. The European Union has published this directive a long time ago, but in the case of Spain, for example, we didn't take attention, or we didn't pay attention to this directive, and now we are working, we are arriving in a bad position to accomplish with this directive. In the future, we will have something similar in the United Nations, and the goal is to arrive in time, to take the train at the beginning, not at the end. Well, the two last conclusions in terms of sustainable development are related with our ability to manage the future. That has to be based in proven science, not just in the criteria or in very bright ideas of a few people. And of course, this sustainable management needs of intergovernmental management. And the IOC UNESCO, for sure, that will continue working with this spirit. We will try to do our best, and my office, my telephone, my email is open to all of you. If you want to propose something to me, I will respond to you, for sure. I always respond to all my emails, even if it is just to say that it's another colleague, the one who have to address with your issue, but you can be sure that you have an open door in IOC UNESCO. So that's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I am open to discuss with you, or in the corridors, in the coffee breaks. I will be very happy to talk with you and to explain you in a more detail some of these issues that I understand that are very complicated, and a lot of concepts were fed now in this presentation, and well, not always is easy to digest so many information in a short time. Thank you very much.